What if I told you that Eiichiro Oda may have hidden the entire foundation of the final war inside one forgotten cover illustration almost 25 years ago, long before we knew about Imu, the Empty Throne, Nefertari D. Lily, or the true history of the 20 Kingdoms? At first, this image looks like nothing more than one of Oda's strange and playful drawings. Vivi stands in front of a gigantic tree, wearing a pirate outfit and holding a glass of wine. Luffy is positioned directly behind her among the branches. Swords are buried all across the tree, and one unusual squirrel stands beside them. But after the latest events on Elbaf, almost every detail suddenly feels important, because Luffy is framed between two swords in almost the exact position in which Imu would later trap him. Fans have counted what appear to be 19 swords throughout the tree. Vivi remains separate from them while carrying 3 pistols around her waist, and the squirrel now looks like a direct reference to Ratatoskr and Elbaf's legendary hammer. And somehow, that still isn't everything, because Vivi is also wearing exactly 3 bracelets, creating another strange pattern around the number 3 that immediately brings Blackbeard, his 3 pistols, his 3-skull flag, and the famous theory about 3 souls living inside his body into the picture. This artwork may therefore contain far more than one piece of foreshadowing. It may connect Imu, the 19 founding families, Vivi, Elbaf, Blackbeard, and Luffy's role in the final conflict, all inside a single image Oda created before most of these ideas had even been revealed. The illustration appeared with chapter 217 in February 2002, during the final part of the Alabasta saga, and unlike the earlier description, it does not show the entire Straw Hat crew exploring a forest. The focus is much tighter. Vivi dominates the foreground in an elaborate red pirate outfit, holding a glass in one hand while 3 pistols hang around her waist. 3 bracelets are stacked around her wrist, and several other small accessories decorate her clothing. Directly behind her, Luffy stands high inside the enormous tree, carrying a large bag over his shoulder and looking into the distance, while swords are embedded throughout the trunk, roots, branches, and surrounding landscape. One particular squirrel stands prominently near Luffy, and unlike a normal background animal, it is large, strangely dressed, and positioned almost like an actual character. Chapter 217's cover was released on February 4th, 2002, meaning Oda drew this scene nearly 25 years before the current events of the manga. For decades, there was no reason to take any of this seriously. Vivi's clothes looked like a fun pirate redesign. Luffy appeared to be searching for something. The swords simply created a dangerous fantasy environment, and the squirrel felt like one of Oda's usual visual jokes. But now that the story has reached Elbaf, and many of these exact ideas have returned, the cover no longer feels random, because the characters are not simply standing inside an interesting location. They appear to be arranged around a hidden symbolic structure, with Luffy trapped inside the world created by the swords, Vivi standing freely in front of it, and one mythological animal watching from the branches. The first clue is Luffy's position. He stands directly inside the giant tree, and although the swords do not actually pierce him in the old artwork, 2 of them are placed on opposite sides of his body, visually trapping him between the blades. One sword rises beside him from below, another is buried close to the other side of his body, and the way Luffy is positioned inside the wood makes the entire image look almost like a less violent version of someone being pinned to the tree. That composition became far more disturbing in chapter 1189, because Imu uses 2 swords to restrain Luffy against the enormous tree on Elbaf, creating almost the same central image Oda drew back in 2002. Luffy, unable to move freely, trapped against a colossal tree by 2 blades. Chapter 1189 was officially published on July 26, 2026, almost 24.5 years after chapter 217. The point is not that both scenes are perfectly identical, because they are not. The old cover does not literally show Luffy being stabbed, and nobody can prove that Oda already knew every detail of chapter 1189 when he created the illustration. But the visual concept is incredibly specific. Luffy is placed inside a gigantic tree, framed by 2 swords, and decades later, Imu defeats him using 2 swords in the same type of location. Oda may not have planned every movement of the battle, but he could have preserved the image he wanted for the final saga long before he was ready to explain what it meant. Symbolically, this becomes even more powerful, because Luffy is not simply trapped by 2 random weapons. He is trapped inside a tree tree filled with the weapons of the old world. Luffy represents freedom, Nika, and the return of the dawn, while the swords represent the rulers and systems that have controlled the world for 800 years, meaning the image may show the warrior of liberation being temporarily imprisoned by the history he was born to destroy. The two swords around Luffy are only the beginning, because when fans began counting the blades embedded throughout the central tree, including the two positioned beside him, they arrived at what appears to be a total of 19. The exact count can be debated, because some weapons are partly hidden by branches or disappear near the edge of the artwork, so this should not be presented as unquestionable proof. But the possibility of 19 swords matters enormously, because 19 is one of the most important numbers in the political history of One Piece. 800 years ago, 20 monarchs formed an alliance, defeated the ancient kingdom, and created the world government. 19 of those families abandoned their original kingdoms, moved to Marijois, and became the ancestors of the celestial dragons. And each of those 19 rulers placed a weapon around the empty throne, as a promise that none of them would ever sit upon it. Only Nefertari Lily refused to move her family to Marijois, and because she did not place a weapon before the throne, only 19 weapons surround it. Now return to the artwork. What appear to be 19 swords are buried inside the same gigantic structure, while Vivi, the descendant of the 20th founding family, stands separately in front of them. She is not another sword buried in the tree, and she is not absorbed into the structure created by the 19 weapons. Instead, she remains free, holding her drink and carrying her own pistols at her side. That difference could visually represent the decision made by the Nefertari family 800 years ago. 19 rulers surrendered their weapons and became part of the New World Order, while the 20th family kept its independence and refused to become gods. The giant tree can therefore be viewed as a symbolic version of the world government itself. The 19 swords are embedded within it, just as the 19 founding families are embedded within the structure of Marijois, while Luffy is trapped in its center, because he is the man destined to confront the legacy they created. Vivi stands outside because her family never fully became part of that structure, and even though the Nefertaris helped create the world government, their later actions suggest that they never accepted the world Imu secretly built. Vivi's placement may be the most important part of the entire image, because Oda did not hide her behind Luffy or reduce her to a small background figure. She is the largest character in the composition, positioned directly in front of the viewer, as though everything behind her belongs to a history connected specifically to her bloodline. In 2002, this made sense, because Vivi was the central character of Alabasta, but after the revelation of Nefertari D. Lily, it feels much more deliberate. Lily was one of the original 20 monarchs, but she refused to move to Marijois, did not leave a weapon at the empty throne, carried the secret initial D, and became connected to the scattering and protection of the poneglyphs. Her actions allowed the history of the Void Century to survive, which is exactly why Imu still views what she did as a catastrophic mistake. This means Vivi is not simply the Princess of Alabasta or an honorary Straw Hat. She is the living heir to the only founding family that stood apart from the other 19, and potentially the heir to an 800-year-old mission Lily was never able to finish. Luffy may possess the physical power needed to defeat Imu, but Vivi could possess the royal authority, historical connection, and political legitimacy needed to expose the lie behind the empty throne to the entire world. That may be why the artwork places Vivi outside the sword-covered tree, while Luffy is trapped within it. Luffy is already fighting the system directly, but Vivi understands that system from the position of someone descended from its creators. Luffy can destroy the throne, but Vivi may be the person who reveals why it should never have existed. Luffy can defeat the Hidden King, but Vivi may be the one who proves that the Hidden King's rule was built upon the betrayal of the original 20 kingdoms. Then there is the squirrel. One particular squirrel is placed prominently beside Luffy, larger and more human-like than a normal forest animal, with what appears to be some kind of helmet or head covering. Back in Alabasta, this simply looked like one of Oda's strange background characters, but after Elbaf, the symbolism is almost impossible to miss. In Norse mythology, Ratatoskr is the squirrel that runs across Yggdrasil, Yggdrasil, the World Tree, carrying messages between the eagle living in its highest branches and the dragon Nidhugger beneath its roots. Elbaf is heavily inspired by Norse mythology. Its colossal tree mirrors Yggdrasil, and the legendary hammer Ragnir possesses the mythical zone power of Ratatoskr, allowing the weapon to transform into a gigantic squirrel. So more than 20 years before Ragnir appeared, Oda drew a strangely important squirrel living on a gigantic tree filled with legendary-looking weapons. The animal is not only connected to Yggdrasil through Ratatoskr, but also to Elbaf's Mjolnir-like hammer, meaning the old cover may contain an early visual version of a concept Oda would not properly introduce until the final saga. The timing makes this even better, because this illustration appeared during the Alabasta saga, the exact period when One Piece first introduced the idea that inanimate weapons could receive devil fruit abilities. Mr. Four's gun, Lasso, had consumed a dog zone and could transform into a living dachshund, establishing the same basic concept later used for Ragnir, a weapon transformed into an animal through a zone devil fruit. That means Oda introduced animal-powered weapons during Alabasta, drew a strange squirrel beside a giant tree during the same saga, and then more than 2 decades later revealed an Elbaf hammer that transforms into Ratatoskr. It does not prove that every detail of Ragnir existed in 2002, but it strongly suggests that Oda may already have been developing the mythology and imagery he planned to use for Elbaf. But there is another detail hiding directly on Vivi's design that may connect this cover to an entirely different part of the final war. Around her waist, Vivi carries 3 pistols, and on her wrist, she wears 3 bracelets. The number 3 is repeated twice on the most important character in the image, and in One Piece, no major character is more closely associated with the number 3 than Marshall D. Teach. Blackbeard's pirate flag contains 3 skulls. He carries 3 flintlock pistols around his waist, and his entire character has inspired the famous theory that 3 different souls, personalities, hearts, or entities may exist within his body. That theory is not confirmed, but it is one of the main explanations fans have created for his unusual body, his inability to sleep, his changing behavior, and his ability to possess more than one devil fruit. Blackbeard's repeated connection to 3 skulls and 3 pistols is the basis for much of that speculation. Seeing Vivi carry 3 pistols while wearing 3 bracelets does not automatically mean she has 3 souls, or that she is secretly connected to Blackbeard, and that would be far too large a conclusion from clothing alone. But the repeated use of 3 creates a visual echo that could point toward Blackbeard's place in the final conflict, especially because he is almost certainly not going to stand quietly on the sidelines while Luffy and Imu fight over the future of the world. The final war may not have only 2 sides. Luffy represents freedom and the dawn, Imu represents control and the old world, but Blackbeard represents chaos, ambition, and the desire to steal the power of both sides for himself. Vivi could become important to all 3 forces because of her connection to Lily, the founding kingdoms, and the truth Imu wants erased. Imu may want Vivi dead because of her bloodline, Luffy will want to protect her because she is his friend, and Blackbeard may want to capture or use her because she holds information or authority connected to the creation of the world government. In that interpretation, the 3 pistols and 3 bracelets do not mean Vivi is like Blackbeard. They may simply foreshadow that the final struggle surrounding her will involve a 3rd force beyond Luffy and Imu. Oda could be placing Blackbeard's visual language onto the character who stands between the 19 founders and the warrior of liberation, quietly suggesting that Teach will enter the conflict just when everyone believes the war has only 2 sides. When every major element is placed together, the chapter 217 cover begins to look less like a random pirate illustration and more like a symbolic blueprint for the final saga. Luffy stands inside a gigantic tree between 2 swords, and nearly 25 years later, Imu pins him against Elbaf's tree with 2 blades. What appear to be 19 swords are embedded across the tree, matching the 19 royal families whose weapons surround the empty throne. Vivi remains separate from those weapons because she represents the 20th family, the Nefertaris, who refuse to become celestial dragons. The strangely important squirrel resembles Ratatoskr, Ratatoskr. The mythological creature later connected directly to Elbaf's legendary hammer, while Vivi's 3 pistols and 3 bracelets create a second hidden pattern that echoes Blackbeard and the mystery of his 3-part existence. This would make the artwork a map of every major force moving toward the end of One Piece. The tree represents Elbaf, Yggdrasil, and perhaps the world itself. The 19 swords represent the founding families and the ancient systems still controlled by Imu. Luffy represents the warrior of liberation trapped inside that system. Vivi represents the one royal family that rejected it. Ratatoskr represents Elbaf's mythological power, and the repeated number 3 may signal the arrival of Blackbeard as the unpredictable third force that turns the final confrontation into something far more dangerous. And perhaps that is the real meaning of Vivi standing at the front. She is not simply there because the cover appeared during Alabasta. She may be standing between the viewer and the entire hidden history of the world because her family is the key to understanding it. Behind her are the 19 weapons of the Founders. Above her is Luffy, the man destined to destroy their system. Beside him is the mythological creature of Elbaf, and attached directly to her body is the number most closely associated with the other great enemy waiting to enter the war. So what do you think? Did Oda really hide the final war inside this one image? And could Vivi's 3 pistols and 3 bracelets be another clue toward Blackbeard's role in the ending? Let me know your theory in the comments, because after almost 25 years, this forgotten cover may finally be revealing the story Oda planned from the very beginning.